I always remember people arguing, like, I think even I've had family members say this, like, well, you don't want like a woman for president because they'd be too emotional and they'd probably set off the nuclear, launch. Because I'm like, wasn't every war started by a man because they had like either, small dick syndrome or they got their feelings hurt? Like, at no point was it like, oh, men were having a cool, collected conversations for millennia.
I think we're at the end of this. We should go to war.
Yeah. So stupid.
Dearly beloved, welcome to the Unblessed Podcast, where we inquire and exposit the mysteries of that ancient text, that good book itself, the Holy Bible. We are not theologians nor historians. We are but armchair philosophers who spent years in seminary or on a church staff and have since departed to make our own way. We invite you now to read, think, and laugh with us as we dive deep into the denominational doctrines of the divine in the Unblessed Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Unblessed Podcast. My name is Evan.
And I'm Scott.
And we are two ex-unwilling ushers. Scott, did you ever have to usher in church?
I did, in many capacities. There was a couple different ways to be an usher. There was bulletin passer outer at the front door.
These are confessions of ushers. Confessions of ushers. OMG.
Yeah, not the cool usher confessions that everyone wants to hear.
Nope.
Really lame, slightly fundamentalist church ushers.
Describe ushering, like what it was for everybody who.
Yeah, so usually it was just like a volunteer role that you'd have in a church, and you'd grab typically men. I know sometimes we'd have the ladies do it, but almost always it was like older dads that just needed to do something.
Yeah.
And their whole deal is just passing shit around the pews. So whether it's communion, they're doing the whole communion dance of passing the wafers and little wine couplets around. And when it came to the tithing and offering plates, passing those. And there's a very coordinated dance. It's like watching, true poetry in motion.
Yeah.
Just kidding. It's just a bunch of frumpy dads like walking around. But did you usher yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. We ushered every now and then. I think we went through a spree where like the college ministry at my church would do the offering plate passing, which I honestly think makes sense. Why make the people who are old and rich pass the money and not the people like, you're going to pass it down a line of kids that are in student debt already. Like, what money do you think you're going to get?
It is a weird thing, the offering plate. Like, if you think about it, it's like it's a public, you got to either place money in it or like a little check thing, or you have like the offering.
We always laughed whenever it came down the college row because it was like, all right. It just like gets like, how it came in is how it was going out.
Did you ever have like the efficiency where it's like if only like two people were in a row and like no one was going to tithe, could you like wave off the usher? Like,
yeah,
we would do that sometimes. Like it'd be like just college kids. I remember doing that. And I would like wave off the usher, like, ain't getting nothing over here, buddy. Like,
oh yeah, for sure. Like whenever there was like one of us who was doing the offering plate, we would like kind of look down the aisle and look at everybody, and they'd like give us the nod of like, yeah, and we'd be like, all right, let's skip this over.
Yeah, we got places to be. We gotta get to lunch. We can't just pass down. But it would sometimes take forever, especially if you have like a packed crowd. You have to do the S pattern. So you had, dad one on the left side of the aisle and dad two on the right side of the aisle, and it had to be coordinated. Sometimes there'd be a collision of plates in the middle if they sent it down.
And that's just embarrassing. And then like no one
That's on the stat board. After, they go back and review at the end of the day.
Do you think there has to be churches that have film and watch film of their performances?
Jerry, you should have shuffled more. You got to push up with your hands. So really get in there behind the shoulder blades.
God.
I think that Catholic Church has a little bit more serious usher game.
Yeah.
Holly's uncles, they've been ushers for like the last 65 years, and they don't know a lick about Catholicism. They just go and show up, and they sit in the back. There's actually like a special room that they sit in. It's kind of like a green room for ushers, and they'll just chill there. It's his way of getting out of service. That's what I found out, is he just doesn't have to sit through mass. He can just hang out there, have a cup of coffee, have a donut. Then they ring the bell. He comes upstairs. I think they have the basket with a stick, so they kind of move it down, one aisle at a time. But he's never attended mass in 60 years, thanks to ushering. So
I went to
thanks, Uncle Bob.
Mormon church one time.
Whoa.
It was in college. I met this Mormon. I was like, hey, I'll go to Mormon church if you go to Baptist church. And he was like, okay. We did kind of a trade-off. He came to our service, and then his service was actually later in the day, so I was able to go out and eat and go around 3 or whatever, and I drove over. Mormons are hella evangelical. Evangelicals are evangelical, but Mormons especially if they're on mission, which this guy is
dripping.
Everything was dripping. Everything was dripping.
That Mormon drip.
That Mormon
they have
drip.
the absolute fantastic drip.
So we go to the Mormon church, and they don't do any sort of communion wine or communion grape juice. It's just straight up water. That is the only,
just water.
Yeah, that. And so the only the three things I remember is, one, the water for communion. Two, they had a song called Praise the Man, which is about Joseph Smith.
Love it. Love that for him.
Yep. And then the third one was this girl goes up and she starts talking about going to temple, which temple is just their re-indoctrination, basically.
Nice.
You just go there and Mormons won't tell you what goes on. So it's very hush-hush, which is a little...
Secret club.
Little shisty. But she gets up and she talks about, how horrible she was and how she was, doing all this stuff. And then she went to temple, and now she's, back and saved as a Mormon or whatever. Yeah, I got off topic, but that was the weirdest experience regarding ushering.
Okay, so Mormon ushers,
Ushers. Everybody was dressed fine except this one dude who was in a leather jacket, and he was taking attendance.
Leather jacket?
Yeah, he was in a leather bomber jacket, and he was just walking around just like, all right, you. And I was like, Sterling, what's he doing? And Sterling was like, oh, he's tracking attendance. He's taking attendance, see who all's here. And I'm like,
we just kind of did a quick glance at the audience and just ballparked it. It was like, 150,000.
I'm really concerned who was here, who wasn't. Speaking of Usher, there's a new musical
nice
sensation out there.
Perfect execution.
Her name is Flamey Grant. She's a drag queen Christian musician.
Apparently at the top of the Christian charts, which I don't know what that means anymore, to be at the top of the Christian charts. I don't know if there's a single... I don't know what it means to be at the top of the charts, period, to be perfectly honest. Is there a chart like at an airport that just
I think you
goes off?
You can select your own genre, but then if other people listen to you, you get pushed up. And so I think this is a matter of, she is a Christian artist, but other people are listening to her because they're not Christian. Me, for example, I listened to her the other day. And so I think that's what is pushing her That would be my guess was pushing her up, only because based on the national profile around Christians versus, drag performances, I can't imagine there are that many people. It's getting played that much on K-Love.
I'm curious if it is on Christian radio stations. Maybe in some towns. I see it's the #1 iTunes Christian album. After a right-wing preacher rebuked her on Twitter. So
yes,
the scandal certainly helped elevate the visibility. Because I never heard of her until just this past week. One of the songs popped up on my TikTok, and it's very good. It's not like a hyper pop like what you kind of imagine of like drag queen. Like, it's like a worship song, kind of like a more somber like story to tell. Yeah. So I'm curious the conversation that's going around churches now about specifically Flamey Grant. Like, if this is, I would imagine like my church growing up, this would be on the banned list. Like, you would just be like, oh, well, that's impossible. Like, you can't dress like that and be a Christian artist. Impossible. Those two are exclusive of each other.
Well, I think it's hilarious. Did you ever listen to Derek Webb at all?
No, not really.
Derek Webb had I got into Derek Webb late in college, and got really into him. And our college intern was like, all right, be careful. Like, he was just like, I like Derek Webb. I like his music. Our college intern guy was very much like a, I like all music, this, that, or the other. But he was just like, take him with a grain of salt type stuff. But he had one one song where he just straight up says, fuck in the middle of it. And then the line after is like, some of you are just more held up on that rather than what my song is actually about. And so it's of no surprise to me that Derek Webb, that's who he is. He's kind of this like Michael Gungor style person, who isn't afraid to like bump the road, and just kind of doesn't give a shit, is now recording with a Christian drag queen.
Oh, interesting.
Because he's on the top song that you'll find on Spotify.
Oh, so they collab together.
Yeah.
Ah, okay, interesting. I'm looking up some more about Flamey Grant. So they were a worship leader for 22 years prior to this, which makes sense in my book. I think here they mentioned that they did folk music for a while right before this as well. So clearly a long history of music and a lot of church shame and guilt cooked into that. So
this is just the more exasperated version of Katy Perry getting pushed out of being a Christian artist because she was going down that road, but then producers told her boobs were too big.
Oh my God. Well, I think what's interesting about this though is that she's keeping the Christian label. Yeah. And like they're still Christian. Like Katy Perry was like, okay, I'm just done making Christian music.
Exactly.
And just start making pop music. Like, where I think what's really interesting about this is that, Flamey Grant could just say, all right, I'm just done with all this. I'm tired of people judging me, and I'm just going to make my own music. But she's specifically saying, I want to make worship music. I want to make Christian music that people can essentially worship God with, which is such a fascinating conversation to have nowadays, where I love the kind of definition of drag is like you're born naked and everything else is drag.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is. It's like people are now dealing with the conversation of what is too much dress up for a man and what is too much dress up for a woman. Yeah. That's really what we're having. Like, drag is that conversation, and people make it way more sexualized and like disturbing than it needs to be of the conversation, when really just coming down to what can you put on your face and your body that makes you who you are, and why does it matter what things you put on? So it's fascinating to me that, like, by calling yourself a drag queen and a worship artist, you're essentially just saying, like, I can just dress however the hell I want and I can still make worship music.
The Puritans you quote wore wigs and heels.
Yeah, exactly.
I just don't.
It's dress up. Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. I want to pose this question to you.
Okay.
So Flamey Grant that's a nod to Amy Grant. If you were a drag Christian artist, what would your name be?
Oh man, it'd probably be Michael Wiener Smith. Michael W. Smith. I don't know.
I think I'd have a whole band, and I'd be the Gaither Mothers.
That's great. The Gaither Mothers. Oh man, I've never thought about that. If I had to have a drag name, especially as a Christian artist. Yeah. Oh, who are like some other titans of like '90s Christian worship? I mean, we have like Amy Grant. I remember
Car Woman. Steph Carmen.
Oh my gosh, that one went over my head. I was like,
you could be Carmen and spell it actually Carmen or Car Woman.
Oh, that's really good. Oh man, that whole era of music is something. Like it was really tame too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I never really got into that scene. Like I didn't really own a lot of. My first like worship Christian album was probably like Mercy Me. That was probably, and I was already getting into more like the rock bandish kind of stuff. It wasn't like, it didn't feel like a Sunday service, worship. Because that was how like
more
a lot
like
of music sounded like.
Her See Me.
Bussy Me.
Mercy She.
I'm sorry.
Mercy She.
Mercy She.
Mercy
Oh,
She.
missed it.
Mercy She. There it is.
Damn. This is fun.
Oh my goodness.
All right. Well.
The News Gals.
Yeah. This is great. You have a gift. You have a gift, Evan. The news. I so badly want to see the News Gals now. Oh, this is so great. I'm trying to think of other worship bands now.
Christina Tomlin. Christina Stanfill.
Oh my god. What about like Hillsong worship? Would it just be like
Her Song?
Amazing. Speaking of Her Song, we're going to be talking about one of the most upsetting, controversial, taken out of context passages in the Bible, and that's Ephesians 5.
And we're going to take it out of
22.
context, too.
And we're also going to, not do it. It's due diligence.
Exactly.
So we're going to talk about the roles of wives and husbands and why women need to just shut the hell up in church.
The opinions and statements of Scott Moran do not reflect the opinions and statements of everybody involved in this podcast.
I'm just reading the Bible, everyone. I'm just reading verbatim right here in the Message version.
So yeah, Ephesians 5, starting in verse 22, starts off, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband,
starting off strong.
For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Savior of the body. So let's pause. Already getting into it.
Pausing.
What growing up did this mean to you?
As a kid, it meant you just take direction from the husband. I think I took it pretty plainly. It was a matter of, okay, who's the boss in the house? It's the man. That's essentially how it was taught to me anytime this was preached upon, but I don't know if I went super deep into that as a kid. I think I kind of developed a different understanding of what submitting to another looked like as I was growing more in my faith, like through my high school and college years. But initially it was proposed as, okay, women just have to like follow their husband's lead.
What would you say?
In decisions they make.
What would you say as you grew? What would you say submission meant?
It was probably more of like you collaborate with each other, but there are. This is like almost like gross to revisit my brain now, but it was like you collaborate, but essentially there are like natural roles that God has assigned. That's what this comes down to, is that God has given a natural leadership ability to men and a more servitude and, dare I say, submissive attitude to women. So it comes down to, and this is what sucks about it, is that you could even say, yeah, my wife has great ideas, but at the end of the day, whoever's going to pull the trigger or actually execute the plan or make the decision has to be the man.
I think the most ridiculous example of this I ever encountered was my youth minister. It wasn't my youth minister, I should say. Like, I was kind of already on the way out. I was in my senior year of high school, and then, they hired him, and he and I were basically co-youth ministers at that point. I was just volunteering, but he was like, yeah, Lana, or whatever her name was, whatever his wife's name was, she's like, she works, but like, since I'm the man, our finances primarily come from me, and then everything else can come from her. That was
a weird thing that came out of this too, was like the financial
Yeah,
aspect.
and I was like, in what world does that make sense? I was like, I looked at him kind of weird. I was like, really? I was like, Lana is a nurse. You are a youth minister part-time, and your other part-time gig is doing anti-tobacco classes that can't be making you a lot of money.
There's some strange vibe with Christian men where they have to be the breadwinner in the household, or else it's not a holy and Christian household. Like, the man has to be providing the most money, otherwise that was a thing. Like, I remember there was certain people would look down on couples if they found out, like, well, she's a doctor and he is just like, I don't know, he works at Panera.
Yeah.
Like, and people like be snooty about that.
Which
that's just not right.
Even outside of Christian culture, that exists.
Oh, absolutely, it does. Yeah.
It is.
But I think Christian culture is, I wouldn't know if it's necessarily the origin, but certainly a source of this, dynamic that they're pushing is, okay, well, men have to be making more money than wives, or otherwise they're just not real men. I think that's what it comes down to. But
it's hilarious because both pastors that I talked to about like stuff like this, somehow the conversation came up. One of them was like, yeah, well, when I was in seminary, he was like, my wife was my sugar mama. He was like,
yeah,
it was the way it had to be. He was like, it's, and it's completely fine. And so this is one of those instances where more is being pulled from this verse than intended. By all means, I'm not sticking up for the verse.
No, I think anybody, from this podcast, hopefully people realize we're not trying to defend the Bible.
Oh my God.
But
like this is where it's like, okay, like objectively the verse is saying a lot, and it's saying a lot that can cause problems. It's saying a lot that does
it's
cause
certainly
problems.
one of the more direct passages about roles where, I mean, it just says submit to your husband.
But Scott, what about the rest of it where it talks about husbands?
Oh,
that's
we should keep going.
Oh my God, like,
we're out of context. We're so stupid.
Dumb. Oh my God, we're just dumb.
Well, let's get some more context. Go ahead, Evan.
Now, as the church submits to Christ, so wives are to submit to their husbands in everything. Okay, so maybe that's where the financial stuff comes from.
Okay. So So finances, everything.
Finances, sex, everything, anything, you name it. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her to make her holy, cleansing her with a washing of water by the word. He did this to present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or anything like that, but holy and blameless. So see, there's more for the husband to do.
Yeah, we do so much more.
Yeah.
Like women submit and they have to do everything we say, but we have to love them, and like send them flowers every couple months.
Because if a
half-hearted note,
if we don't love them, then people are going to think they're ugly.
Yeah, this is where it gets kind of icky. I don't know if that's what it's saying, Evan. It sounds like it's saying that if we don't love them, they're just going to be covered in spots and wrinkles and blemishes.
Oh, sorry.
And no
I meant lepers. They're gonna. Sorry, I was taking the verse out of context entirely. Here, I need to take it in context and say that if I'm not properly leading the house or whatever, and I'm not making the most money, and the decisions aren't coming through me, then people are gonna look at my wife like she's got 7,000 boils on her skin.
What does it really mean to lead the house? That's a whole nother discussion, but was my family off or did every other family have a Brady Bunch family meeting every morning and the dad ran it with a whiteboard and they had a execution plan for the day?
No.
Is that what it is?
No house I knew of ever was definitely led. If I pointed to it, I'd be like, that's led by a man.
Yeah.
And it's not I would hesitate to say that it's solely led by the wife, but at the same time, it my dad gets mad, my mom doesn't care. My mom gets mad. Everybody cares. So who? I'm not to say who's really in charge, but who on some level there's an authority there. Someone's doing most of the work, and then you upset that person, and it's all right, well,
family dynamics have changed throughout the years.
Yep.
That's obvious, but we now live in a society where I would say most people want to have a collaborative relationship.
Yeah.
That they actually see each other as two human beings, working towards goals together. And the problem started arising when people realized that women were assigned all the housework for years. Oh, you have to rear the children. You have to do all the dishes. You have to make meals. And the husband's just supposed to go out and have a job. But when that got flipped on its head in the last couple hundred years, thanks to, I don't know, women's rights.
Women's rights, World War II, the industrial age, where it was no longer men go out to farm, women rear the children. Now it was men are off at war, who does whatever at home. How do you...
Yeah, that's a good point.
Who makes the tires? Who makes the actual shit that they're going to use? And so...
Yeah.
That, so all of that, was in a boiling pot, or all of that was just a powder keg to this point of now we have, and we've long had this, women in the workforce, and women rightfully so demanding respect. And a verse from 2,000 years ago that's saying the complete opposite.
Yeah, it's something where it's not that this verse is not getting taken out of the biblical context, but we don't have a historical context of what this verse is talking about. So people just assume, well, it's obviously talking about my wife now.
Yeah.
I got to push her around. I got to, tell her what to do because the Bible says I'm a husband and she's a wife, so I get to lead the charge. But this book was written at a time where women were not seen as partners in marriage, working towards a goal. It was not a, hi, honey, how was your day? It was very much oh, my daughter's for sale. Do you want to marry her? Do you have 5 goats?
There's even speculation that Joseph married Mary that he was an elder in his community.
Oh, yeah.
And that he married her so people wouldn't think she was a whore.
Right. Yeah.
Not because he loved her.
Yeah. Yeah. God knocked her up
without any foresight.
Yeah. Didn't see the optics coming down the road.
Boy, I wonder what people are going to think about this.
I think it's interesting too, the comparisons and what it really says, that the men or the husbands in these verses get likened to the perfect God and creator of the universe, that there's nothing wrong. Like, we're supposed to be Christ in this, position, which people always would say, well, Christ had it tough. He had to sacrifice everything and put his life on the line.
He also gets worshipped.
Exactly. That's the thing that people don't want to talk about, is that this verse, the real problem is that you're likening men to being perfect and worthy of worship, and then you're likening women to
sinners.
They have flaws, and they have to be redeemed by somebody else to be worthy of something.
And the idea in this verse of redeeming that person is not for their own redemption. It's so that you look good.
That too. It's not the whole point. It says, having cleansed her, that he might present the church to himself in splendor. So it comes from a selfish point of view of, I'm doing this for my own gain. Like, I want you pure because I like,
You're my trophy wife for me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the tone of this verse. And we have wrestled with this passage for thousands of years now, and it's it needs to get put on the shelf. Damn it. But it's stayed in the Bible, and now it's in there. But let's keep going. There's a couple other interesting spots.
In the same way, husbands are to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. So, fellows, feel free to masturbate. For no one ever hates his own flesh, but provides and cares for it, just as Christ does the church, since we are members of his body. And then it quotes, I believe, Genesis. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. I want to talk about the one flesh thing a little bit.
Yeah.
So, when I was growing up, I had premarital sex described to me as becoming one flesh and then ripping away.
Yikes. What a definition for a kid.
Especially if that's not the person you're marrying.
Yeah.
Which at that point I was just like, whoa.
Dastardly things you can do.
Well, then premarital sex with somebody who you're going to marry anyway is fine. Which is like, that's the thing about like purity culture, and we haven't talked about purity culture yet in the podcast, but we need to.
Yeah.
Is that it forces teenagers to think for loopholes. Because it's already... Scott and I have talked about how, like, teenage boys are just jerk-off gremlins. Like,
yeah,
basically. And so they're looking for what is already a loophole mindset, and now you're just giving them a book of rules and daring them to find the loophole, and they do. And
yeah, that's exactly what it is, that you create... people just try to justify their desires and their behaviors in some kind of biblical fashion, and they'll either twist verses and say, I can go all the way up to this point, and it's still not considered sex, and then you can just make sex one specific act or one specific thing. It's P to V and that's it. But I can get handies, or I can get whatever. But
if I don't come, it's not masturbation.
Oh my gosh. I think I would love to do a purity culture episode, but at the same time, I don't know how we're going to get through it with all the jokes. It would be...
Oh, yeah, y'all, listener, you think it's bad now.
Yeah.
You think this...
a whole hour devoted to it.
You think this episode's rough right now. Holy shit.
Woo! So men are supposed to love their wives as much as their own body.
Yeah.
Again, it's all centered upon the man in this verse. It's not... Love your wife, for she is a creation of God and an image of God. Notice it doesn't say that. It doesn't say woman was created. And that's actually that's the context of woman too, is that she comes from man.
Yeah.
That she is not the full image of God necessarily. And people are probably going to hate that take, but Genesis in the story, it's Adam is supposed to be like the spitting image of God, what God would look like. Essentially, like as a
he made form, man in his own image.
Yeah, and then woman was to come and be a helper or a servant to the man to help him in his journey of whatever he's got to do, just dicking around the earth, I guess. And now I sentence you, man. Go. Hang out. Eat some fruits and veggies.
So
Who knows?
this is a wild thought.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Before the fall, could Adam have jerked off?
That's a great question. Fundamentalist side brain, no. Just the thought of even. Well, it depends on if he's lusting in his heart. I think that's where it comes down to. Because if he's just changing the oil,
He's just emptying the trumpet valve, the spit valve.
oh my gosh, this is so gross. I don't know. I mean, I took a good chunk of like Jewish history courses
Never
in college,
covered.
and we never talked about masturbation. So I don't have a good idea of the Jewish Judeo-Christian values centered around masturbation. Not really airtight on that one. But I know you weren't allowed to. Well, there is a passage in Genesis where I can't remember who it's, but he spills. It says he spilled his seed upon the floor, so he doesn't get his servant, I think servant or wife, pregnant. And that's not looked down upon, but it's also not glorified. So I think we're safe if you technically. This is such a gross conversation. From a technical perspective of the Bible, I think it comes down to they don't really care and they don't want to talk about it.
Same.
said every listener right now. Move on.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
So this mystery is verse 32. This mystery is profound, but I'm talking about Christ and the church, saying that Christ and the church will become one flesh. To sum up, each one of you is to love his wife as himself, and the wife is to respect her husband. So all he's looking for is a little bit of respect. Just a little bit.
Just a little bit of respect.
Suck it to me, suck it to me, suck it to me, suck it to me. It's a wild verse, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned that at no point is it saying, love your wife because she is a creation of God, and love your wife because you love her. How about that?
And that's the thing is, I have heard this preached upon in more, I wouldn't say progressive churches, but churches that are trying to be a little bit more with it, be a little bit more modern.
Yeah.
And I can tell that's what they want to say. That's the point they're trying to make anyway, is that love your wife because she's, first of all, a human being, and that demands respect in itself. And two, because if you love this person, then that's the kind of the definition of love is to give and take in that relationship. So people try to make this verse fit that bigger context anyway. And that's why I'm always like, why do we even need this thing?
Yeah.
Like, why force this upon people when there's already a greater, and I would say better, virtue that we all have kind of agreed to in modern times of we should just treat each other equally and with respect. And
First John does a much better job talking about love than Ephesians, because First John talks about love being like, what greater version of love is this, that a man would lay down his life for his brothers?
Yeah.
You know, that is a much better, like, to love someone is to sacrifice for them.
Yeah.
But here in Ephesians,
Absolutely.
he's like, well, sacrifice for someone so that way you look good.
Yeah. I keep just thinking about that point of how, men are likened to the perfect God of everything, and women are likened to essentially sinners, the church, that can't get their act together, and you got to whip them into shape. I mean, it's such a narrative that is being pressed upon people.
And we've had zero problems with men being the head of everything.
Yeah, no problems I can think. Not one war I don't think was started by a man. Yeah.
Nope.
Not
Can't
one.
think of one.
I always remember people arguing, like, I think even I've had family members say this, like, well, you don't want like a woman for president because they'd be too emotional and they'd probably set off the nuclear launch. Because I'm like, wasn't every war started by a man? Because they had like either, small dick syndrome or they got their feelings hurt. Like, at no point was it like, oh, men were having a cool, collected conversations for millennia.
I think we're at the end of this. We should go to war.
Yeah. So stupid. Ephesians 5, I honestly haven't looked at this verse in a hot second, and it feels yucky once again to read through.
I think the fun part is the defense of Ephesians 5:22. It's like, wives, submit to your husband. It's like, well, there's a lot more instructions for men, and then you look at the instructions for men. It's like, ooh, this is greasy. Like,
women, submit everything you have to your man, and don't ever think for yourself. Men, have a good time, and make sure your wife looks hot.
Make sure your wife looks hot. Otherwise, people are going to be like, hey, he's married to a not hot wife.
Did you ever have pastors that would introduce like their wives?
My smoking hot wife.
Hot wife. What's that about? Like, what do you think that grandstanding is?
Because
in church,
now that you're married, you can say that.
Yep.
That's exactly, like, you've arrived. You're now the ideal model family in the heading for this whole chapter is in instructions for Christian households in mind. But you have the ability to do that. There's that famous like NASCAR prayer. The guy goes like, yes. Lord, I want to thank you for these Dodges and the Toyotas and the Fords and my smoking hot wife.
I actually really enjoy that brand of Christian, like when people are so removed from the Bible that they just kind of use it as a, like they're gonna pray for like V8 engines before they. I don't know. There's something somewhat wholesome about that guy.
Oh yeah.
But it's, to me, it's like the objectifying of women, of like, she's like my beautiful wife, even if it seems like nice on the surface, of like, I got my gorgeous, beautiful wife, and all you're just doing is presenting that as an object of like, well, this is just something that is my plaything that I have at home. That's good to look at. Some little, arm candy.
Take a look at my pew candy over there.
Pew candy. That would be my drag name, actually.
Pew candy. Fair enough.
But yeah, to me, it's just that context of like pastors projecting their own insecurities of like, well, I got to show that I'm like a man. And so I gotta be the head of household, and I gotta make sure I have a hot wife at home that listens to me.
And as a man, I can be saucy and be a little bit gross because men are gross.
Yeah.
Did you ever read Wild at Heart?
I think I put it down. I think I had it in like high school, and I think my dad really likes that book. So I think I was like, I'll give it a shot.
Book where the guy just talks about how men invented everything. Oh, and I was going through it with like this guy I was discipling, and we both looked at each other. We were like, well, that's not true. Like, and so from then on, we were like, we're going to finish this book, but this is more of a critical thinking discipleship than anything else at this point.
It's like what we talked about, I think, last episode, like how people are saying, well, like, we thank the Catholic Church for healthcare, and it's being disingenuous because it's the same thing saying, well, men invented everything. It's like, yeah, because for the longest time, women weren't allowed in any spaces to even try to do anything. Yeah. So it's like, you can't compare today to, well, look at all these men inventors in the past. It doesn't work because we've erased and shoved people out of spaces where they're able to do such things, like create and have, instead of just rearing children at home. So I don't get, Wild at Heart of like, see, that's why men are like better than in every possible facet of society, blah, 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 blah. Men suck. There.
Yep.
I said it.
Yeah. So
that's our official take on the Unblessed Podcast.
Yeah. Men are Not
Get
not
out,
great.
man.
We're disgusting. I don't know why women want us. So
Honestly, I think about that a lot.
like men are the worst salesmen for men. When you think about it, women are better salesmen for men than men are. Like we can't hustle our own product.
No. Most men look good because a woman helped them.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. And if it wasn't a woman, it was a gay man.
Exactly.
Like, it's the feminine energy that we need. Masculine energy is just gross. It's when it's basically masculine energy is whenever me and Evan go down the rabbit hole about masturbation jokes. That is what masculine energy will give the world.
Yep.
Oh man. Well, do you have any final thoughts on Ephesians 5?
Katie, are you listening? No. This is just such it's a passage I've heard oddly defended by so many women in Baptist churches more than any other passage. Where it was like, well, what about the rest of it? What about the rest of it? What about the rest of it? What about all the verses after it? God gives much more instructions to men. I'm like, no. I think like this is the difference of saying, all right, I need you to clean the house, and then spending an hour talking to Tommy about taking a bath. Like who has more responsibility? Who has more things to do?
The roles in a household or a marriage have just, they're always evolving.
Yeah.
And I think where we're at today, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but we have what's the term? Egalitarian, like everything should be equal in a household. I think that's like the theological term maybe, but
Egalitarian.
another drag name.
Is it a great one?
No, it's not.
It's pretty horrible.
But we want to have equal shared everything, but then we use and apply verses like Ephesians 5 but at the end of the day, it's the man that needs to, press the button. He's got to take the wheel. And I don't get that. It's the same argument for why, like, I know in my church it was like why women couldn't be pastors.
Yeah.
But they could teach, they could lead Bible studies, they could cook meals, they could serve in every other capacity, they could be on the worship team, blah, 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 blah. But this can't be like the face of the leadership, essentially. Like, that's what it came down to. I remember having a drawn out discussion in high school because somebody requested to be a worship leader that was a girl in high school. And immediately it was like, yeah, that's fine. You can lead a couple songs. But then our youth pastor was like, well, actually, I don't think that's the right thing to do. Like, we shouldn't be modeling that women are leading worship. Like, men should be in those leadership positions. And I remember, like, all the kids in the youth group were like, we don't really care. Like, she's great. Like, and that's the whole problem. It's like you have people who are so gifted and talented that can lead because their talents allow them to. But because of these dated and hardline roles that have to be assigned, we go, well, you have to, at the end of the day, submit to a man, and he's going to do the job like worse than you, but you have to give him a shot because he's a guy.
Yep.
So that's just the way it goes. So,
and from a numbers perspective, like, it doesn't even make sense because the amount of women in church outnumbers the amount of men in church.
Yes. Yeah.
And
there's more women going to church than men. Yeah.
Yep.
It makes no sense.
Go to
that
any
men have
church
to
and just do a head count.
It makes no sense. And when I was working at churches, we had the same song and dance. Thanks, Baptist. That's the way it is in the Baptist church, is that you can have a woman do everything behind the scenes, but if their face is on the website, it can't say pastor. It has to be like minister or like maybe like, or just leader.
Yeah.
I don't even think it'd be leader. It had to be like
Executive
God,
assistant,
leader.
secretary.
Yeah. But you could lead the whole childcare division.
Yeah.
But you're not the leader. You're not the pastor.
Not at our church and college. Our children's ministry minister was a man and had to be. Every pastoral position had to be filled by a man.
That's so
Now the teachers, the volunteers,
yeah.
I think that's where the rubber met the road. Was it? Were you getting paid to do it? Got to be a man.
So the guy's sitting around in the church office all week, twiddling his thumbs, and then the people actually leading the curriculum and doing all the hard work don't get the credit or the pay. It's ass backwards, I tell you.
Yeah.
Well, let's shut this verse. I'm tired of looking at it. What's on your radar? What's cooking over there, Evan?
Speaking of man,
Here's a man right here.
extra man. I went and saw Oppenheimer in the 70 millimeter
Very
IMAX.
manly.
Yep. It was incredible. Cillian Murphy is amazing. Robert Downey Jr. is the best role I've ever seen him in. Matt Damon plays a wonderful douchebag. Emily Blunt was great. Florence Pugh was great. Josh Peck was there and was good.
Wow. Was there.
I mean, he's probably got like 5 minutes of total screen time when it comes down to it. But you do see it, and you're like, that's Josh Peck. Rami Malek's eyes, as always, do the acting for him. Because he just has...
Do they explode at the end of the movie with the bomb? Like they just pop out like Indiana Jones?
Oh, Rami Malek's eyes? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I thought they did this is obviously a story that needs to be taken care of when you tell it. There are a lot of sensitivities around it, and I think Christopher Nolan did an amazing job. Not really spoiling anything, but like when it's after the bomb went off and everything like that, and after they drop it, and Oppenheimer gets up and he's
spoiler, geez, thanks for ruining the ending.
Oppenheimer gets up and he's just like, I just wish we had it, in time for the Germans to drop it on Hitler, because that was the whole goal, was to drop it on Hitler, drop it on the Germans. And he's walking away, and I appreciate that they did this. He sees flashes of people getting melted away by the bomb, but they're white Americans, is how he sees them. Because that's what he would have, like, he's just seeing the people around him. And I think that does a good job of not otherizing the subject. It's not distancing the subject from you. And so, as always, Christopher Nolan, amazing job. I walked out of that movie and made probably one of the dumbest comments I've ever made in my entire life, but I hang my hat on it. I said, boy, Iron Man 4 was pretty weird.
I hope everybody in like a 1 mile radius rolled their eyes and tried to throw a shoe at you at that moment.
Yeah. I'm not allowed back in that theater.
Thank God.
So,
Boy,
Scott,
cinema.
Scott, what do you plug in?
I also saw a fantastic Nolan level movie last night featuring Vanilla Ice. And I forget her name, but she was in ER, and the dad from Growing Pains, I think.
Kirk Cameron?
No, the dad.
Okay.
I don't remember his name. I don't remember anyone's name. I just know Vanilla Ice is the main character. That should say enough about the movie that Vanilla Ice is the main character of the movie. It's called Cool as Ice, and it's an hour and 10 minutes of basically Vanilla Ice. You know how like cologne commercials are? Like it's just like a guy like sitting in the middle of like a desert and kind of like panning around and just puttering about, all hot like. That's most of the movie. It's just Vanilla Ice just kind of walking about with a bunch of clothes on. I will spare all the details, but to sum it up, it's Vanilla Ice is in a motorcycle gang, like ninja bikes, and he comes into a small town, and it's really like Footloose, where he meets like a true just damsel that is too guarded by her parents, and he opens her up to the world of Vanilla Ice and hip hop.
Oh, so this is a little bit more like Dirty Dancing.
Oh, sorry, Dirty Dancing.
Dirty Dancing,
yes.
but Vanilla Ice.
Yeah, it's like it's exactly like the Elvis movie, like same quality, but with Vanilla Ice. I will say though, it's kind of fun. It's very colorful. The music is perfect, but the acting, he's carried by everybody else in the movie.
And even then, everybody else isn't doing a whole lot of carrying.
No, not really. But I had fun. I had more fun than I thought I would. So Cool as Ice. That's the summer blockbuster 2023 here at the Moran household. So that's all I got.
Well, thank you everybody so much for listening. You can follow us on TikTok, on Threads, on Twitter, on YouTube at UnblessedPod. You can email us at unblessedpodcast@gmail.com. But without further ado...